So what happened here was good medical care so far, and it's basically not alarming information, and it's not surprising. The president is an older man. I believe he just turned 79 years old. He has had risk factors for this condition that they're talking about, which is called chronic venous insufficiency. And what that really means is that the blood that goes out of the heart has to return to the heart through the veins. And as we age, some of that blood flow back to the heart, that's called venous return, just slows down in some patients more than others. And that can lead to things like swelling. That can look like things that many people would be familiar with, like varicose veins. So this is a pretty normal part of aging, and especially for someone in the overweight to obese category, which is where the president has always been.
Hey guys, Dr. John here. So this has just happened, guys. A new Atlantic report describes Trump wandering the White House at night, shouting that he's the most powerful person in the history of the world. Mental health professionals watching his public behavior are flagging a clinical warning sign called disinhibition, where the brain's filters break down, often associated with serious cognitive decline or dementia. The concern isn't political commentary anymore. It's that a man with nuclear launch codes may be losing his grip on reality in real time. I want to show you exactly what I am talking about because there was a moment, a specific interaction that occurred in the Oval Office that perfectly encapsulates this disintegration happening in front of the entire world.
President, you called yesterday in your Truth Social, you called the Iranians crazy bastards.
True.
What is your response to critics who say that
I don't care about critics.
What is your response to critics who say that it is your mental health that should perhaps be examined as this war continues?
I haven't heard that. But if that's the case, you're going to have more people like me because our country was being ripped off on trade, on everything for many years until I came along. So if that's the case, you're going to have more people.
The Artemis II astronauts, genuine American heroes who have trained for years to push the boundaries of human exploration, who represent the very best of what this nation can achieve when it focuses on something greater than itself. These extraordinary individuals were summoned to the White House for what should have been a dignified ceremony, honoring their courage and their dedication. Instead, they found themselves unwilling participants in a scene so painfully awkward, so deeply uncomfortable, that you can see the horror written across their faces in every frame of footage from that meeting. Donald Trump, standing in the most prestigious office in the land, surrounded by astronauts who have dedicated their lives to space exploration, decided that this was the appropriate moment to start mocking the physical appearance of the NASA administrator. Specifically, Trump fixated on the man's ears.
Well, the best man to tell you that is the man standing right over here. You heard that question? With those beautiful ears of yours? He's got great hearing, you know, he's got super hearing.
Trick of the trade, sir.
The administrator has somewhat prominent ears, and rather than engaging in any substantive discussion about the mission or the future of American space exploration, or literally anything befitting the dignity of the setting, Trump instead began ridiculing the size of this man's ears in front of the assembled astronauts and reporters. He turned to the crew and suggested that the administrator might have an advantage in hearing their answers because his ears were so large. He asked if anyone had questions for the big-eared gentleman. He kept circling back to this juvenile observation as though it were the most fascinating topic imaginable, completely oblivious to the excruciating discomfort radiating from every other person in the room. The astronauts, these remarkable individuals who have spent countless hours preparing to risk their lives for the advancement of human knowledge, stood there frozen in expressions of pure mortification, trapped in a surreal nightmare where the leader of the free world was behaving like a bully on an elementary school playground. You can see it in their faces if you watch the footage closely enough. The tight smiles that never reach their eyes, the glances they exchange with one another, searching for some explanation for what is happening, some protocol for how to respond when the president starts making fun of someone's ears during what is supposed to be a solemn and celebratory occasion. They are being used as props, standing there in their flight suits as backdrop for a man who seems incapable of comprehending the gravity of the moment or the honor that should accompany hosting genuine heroes. And throughout this entire uncomfortable spectacle, Trump appears to have no awareness whatsoever that his behavior is aberrant. He does not notice the frozen expressions. He does not pick up on the silent pleas for for the floor to open up and swallow everyone in the room. He simply barrels forward, convinced that he is being charming and entertaining, completely disconnected from the social cues that would tell any normally functioning adult that they needed to stop talking immediately.
What do you think of that, Jared? Sending help after we win the war? I don't know. Something that bothers me. I don't want to get you guys involved, but I can imagine what you're thinking.
The United Arab Emirates, the UAE, they pulled out of OPEC.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
I think it's great. I think it's great.
This is textbook disinhibition, and it is one of the most reliable indicators that something is going very wrong inside someone's brain. The frontal lobe, the part of the brain that governs impulse control and social judgment, starts to deteriorate, and suddenly the person who once knew how to read a room and adjust their behavior accordingly loses that capability entirely. What remains is pure ID, unfiltered and uninhibited, saying whatever pops into their head regardless of how inappropriate or cruel or outright bizarre it might be. Now let me be precise about what I am saying and what I am not saying. I am not a medical doctor, and I am not offering a clinical diagnosis of Donald Trump's neurological condition. What I am doing is offering my opinion, which is protected by the First Amendment of the United States Constitution. An opinion based on observable behavior that is available for anyone to watch and assess for themselves. And my opinion is that the pattern of behavior we are witnessing, the disinhibition, the grandiosity, the confusion, the late-night social media eruptions, the inability to stay on topic or maintain a coherent train of thought, all of it collectively points toward a man in the grips of significant cognitive decline. Whether the underlying cause is Alzheimer's, whether it is another form of dementia, whether it is some combination of age-related neurological deterioration exacerbated by whatever other health issues may be present, I cannot say with certainty because I do not have access to his medical records, and neither does anyone else who is not actively lying on his behalf. What I can say is that the public evidence is overwhelming, and it is getting worse by the week. The same Oval Office encounter provided yet another example of cognitive malfunction that should be deeply concerning to anyone who cares about the stability of American leadership. Throughout the press conference, Trump repeatedly confused Ukraine and Iran, two entirely different countries on entirely different continents, with entirely different relationships to the United States. This was not a single slip of the tongue that he quickly corrected and moved past. This was a persistent confusion that he returned to multiple times, seemingly unable to keep straight which country he was discussing at any given moment. He had just completed a phone call with Vladimir Putin, a call that lasted approximately an hour and a half. A call that the White House initially tried to keep hidden until Russian media reported on it first and forced an acknowledgement. The details of that conversation remain murky, but what became clear in its aftermath was that Trump could not reliably distinguish between Ukraine, the nation that has been fighting for its survival against Russian aggression, and Iran, the nation that has been engaged in its own conflicts and proxy wars across the Middle East. He talked about how Ukraine was militarily defeated. He claimed that American forces had destroyed 159 Ukrainian ships. He was attempting, it seemed, to discuss Iran and the various military engagements that have occurred in that theater, but he kept saying Ukraine instead, and he did not seem to notice the error even as it happened repeatedly. The people standing around him noticed. The astronauts noticed. The reporters in the room noticed. Everyone watching the footage noticed. But the President of the United States plowed forward, utterly unaware that he was confusing two of the most geopolitically significant nations on Earth. And then the NATO comments started, because apparently the confusion about basic geography was not enough chaos for one press availability. Trump veered into an attack on the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, the military alliance that has been the cornerstone of Western security for decades, and he suggested that King Charles of the United Kingdom would have been more reliable than America's treaty allies. He claimed that the British monarch would have sent ships to assist in a military operation in the Strait of Hormuz, but that NATO would not have helped in Ukraine. Setting aside the rather significant constitutional question of whether King Charles has any authority whatsoever to dispatch British naval vessels anywhere, the more immediate problem was that Trump was once again mixing up his conflicts. NATO has been deeply involved in supporting Ukraine's defense against Russian invasion. The alliance has coordinated military aid, intelligence sharing, training missions, and diplomatic support on a massive scale. Any functioning president of the United States would know this because it has been one of the defining foreign policy challenges of the past several years. But Trump, standing in the Oval Office with war heroes and reporters watching, appeared to have no grasp of these basic facts. When the error became apparent, when it was clear that he had confused the theaters again, he did not pause and correct himself. He did not acknowledge the mistake and move on with a self-deprecating comment, the way a mentally sharp person might recover from a verbal stumble. Instead, he simply kept talking, apparently unaware that he had said anything wrong at all. The pattern extends into his grasp of domestic policy and constitutional law, or more accurately, his complete lack thereof. When asked about a significant Supreme Court ruling that had recently been handed down, a case dealing with Louisiana and Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, a ruling with profound implications for the future of American democracy and the protection of minority voting rights, Trump did not discuss the merits of the decision or its potential impact. He did not articulate a position on whether he agreed with the court's reasoning. Instead, he said he understood the concepts of the ruling. The concepts of a ruling. Think about what that phrase reveals. A person who is mentally engaged with the material would discuss the ruling itself, the arguments, the dissent, the implications. A person who is pretending to know something they have not actually read or understood might vaguely reference the concepts, hoping that the fuzzy language would cover for the absence of actual knowledge. It is the verbal equivalent of a student who did not do the reading assignment trying to bluff their way through a class discussion, except this is the President of the United States discussing a landmark Supreme Court decision that will affect millions of American voters. The concepts of a ruling. This is not how a fully functioning mind discusses complex legal matters. This is how someone who cannot retain information or focus long enough to engage with substance tries to skate by on the appearance of knowledge. And then there is the physical dimension of all this, the bizarre assertions about his own fitness that go far beyond ordinary vanity and into territory that mental health professionals would recognize as delusional thinking. Donald Trump genuinely appears to believe that he is in peak physical condition. He is not being ironic. He is not engaging in humorous self-deprecation. He is deeply, sincerely convinced that his body is a temple of athletic excellence. He has surrounded himself with physicians who, in my opinion, provide medical reports that bear no relationship to objective reality, reports that describe him as being in superb health despite all visible evidence to the contrary. He points to his victories in golf tournaments as proof of his physical prowess, as though excelling at a sport where participants ride in carts between shots and the most strenuous activity is swinging a club while standing still constitutes elite athleticism. And standing there in the Oval Office, in front of the Artemis astronauts who have passed some of the most grueling physical and psychological tests ever devised, tests designed to ensure they can survive the unimaginable stresses of space travel, Trump began musing about how he himself could be an astronaut. He told these elite space travelers that being an astronaut requires being in incredible shape, peak physical condition, and that he believed he met those standards. He said he thought he could do it. He claimed he was physically very good, repeating the assertion as though saying it made it true. He was not joking. Watch the footage and try to find the wink, the smirk, the little gesture that would indicate he was being playful. You will not find it because it is not there. He meant every word, and that sincere belief in his own physical magnificence despite his advanced age and visible frailty is not confidence. It is not charisma. It is delusion of a clinical variety, the kind of grandiose self-perception that characterizes malignant narcissism at its most extreme, and that often worsens as cognitive decline strips away the remaining capacity for self-awareness. Related to this is his apparent inability to recognize that he is, in fact, a senior citizen. He has made comments in the past, and continues to make them, where he refers to seniors as a group separate from himself, as a constituency he is trying to help, a demographic he will eventually join one day. He speaks about old age as something that lies in his future, something that happens to other people, something he has not yet experienced. He is on the cusp of 80 years old, an age when most Americans have been retired for well over a decade, an age when cognitive decline of some degree is statistically more likely than not. And he talks about becoming a senior citizen someday with apparent sincerity. This is not a joke. He is not making light of his age with a clever quip. He seems to genuinely not comprehend that he is elderly, that the physical and mental changes associated with advanced age apply to him just as they apply to everyone else who reaches this stage of life. This is another manifestation of the profound disconnection from reality that characterizes his current mental state, a belief that the normal rules of human biology simply do not apply to him, that he exists outside the constraints that govern everyone else on the planet. The nocturnal behavior provides yet another window into a mind that is not functioning within normal parameters. While most people his age are asleep, while the White House staff has gone home, while the machinery of government has wound down for the night, Donald Trump is awake and posting on social media, 1 in the morning, 12:30 in the morning. The hours when even night owls have typically settled into some form of rest, Trump is hunched over his phone or his computer, firing off messages that range from the merely strange to the genuinely alarming. He posts bizarre memes that appear to originate from the darkest corners of the QAnon conspiracy ecosystem, images and slogans that someone in his position should not even be aware of, let alone amplifying to his millions of followers in the middle of the night. He shares crude graphics renaming the Strait of Hormuz as the Strait of Trump, an act of such naked egomania that it would be embarrassing from a teenager seeking attention on social media, and is absolutely unthinkable from the Commander-in-Chief of the United States Armed Forces. And then there are the posts that go beyond embarrassing and into genuinely frightening territory. The messages about James Comey that employ coded language borrowed directly from organized crime. Let me explain what he posted because it is important to understand the full scope of what the President of the United States was communicating in the wee hours of the morning. Trump posted about the number 86, which in mob terminology is a reference to killing someone, to eliminating them, to making them disappear. He then specified 8647, breaking it down as 8 miles out and 6 feet down, which is an explicit reference to disposing of a body. He further specified that this was a message about James Comey, the former FBI director whom Trump has harbored a notorious vendetta against for years. The President of the United States posted in the middle of the night what appears to be a death threat against a former senior law enforcement official using mob code to deliver the message. He accused Comey of being a dirty cop, claimed he had lied to the FBI, and then spelled out this coded reference to murder and body disposal as though it were a perfectly normal thing for a sitting president to broadcast to the world. This is not political rhetoric. This is not tough talk. This is the behavior of someone who has lost all connection to the norms and boundaries that constrain civilized human conduct, someone whose disinhibition has reached the point where they are publicly fantasizing about the assassination of a political enemy in language borrowed from gangster movies. Family members who have known Donald Trump for his entire life have been increasingly vocal about what they are witnessing, and their perspective carries weight because they observed him long before politics entered the picture. Mary Trump, his niece, a clinical psychologist by training, has been warning for years about the psychological pathologies that define her uncle and has recently spoken about the acceleration of his decline. She has described patterns of behavior that align with what the public is now seeing on an almost daily basis, the grandiosity intensifying, the grip on reality loosening, the desperate need for validation becoming more naked and more frantic. And Fred Trump III, his nephew, has shared observations that paint a similarly disturbing picture of a man who has always been troubled but is now deteriorating in ways that are impossible to ignore. These are not political opponents. These are not members of the opposing party trying to score points before an election. These are blood relatives who have watched this man up close for decades, and what they are saying should be deeply concerning to anyone who cares about the stability of American governance. When family members with professional psychological training are sounding alarms about the president's mental state, it is worth paying attention. And as if all of this were not enough, there is the compounding embarrassment of how the rest of the world is reacting to what they are seeing. The Iranian government, the same Iranian government that the United States has been locked in a tense standoff with for years, the same Iranian government that Trump has postured against as a mortal adversary, has taken to social media to mock his late-night posting habits. Official Iranian accounts have been telling the President of the United States to go to sleep. They have been posting messages suggesting that he appears to be suffering from nightmares, asking if he is eating too much, treating him with the kind of condescending concern you might direct toward a confused elderly relative who has wandered out of bed in the middle of the night. Think about the humiliation inherent in this dynamic. The country that is supposed to view America as its most formidable opponent, the country whose nuclear ambitions have been the focus of intense international diplomacy and military planning, is publicly suggesting that the American president needs to calm down and get some rest because his nocturnal behavior is so obviously erratic. The propaganda coup this represents for Iran is almost incalculable. They do not need to make sophisticated arguments about American decline or the weakness of U.S. leadership. They simply need to repost the things Trump writes in the middle of the night and ask if he is okay, and the point makes itself. The golf course situation adds another layer of absurdity to the whole picture. Trump's Washington, D.C. golf club has been promoting a live golf tournament coming to the property, apparently unaware or unconcerned that the Saudi-backed live golf venture appears to be collapsing. The Saudis, who have been bankrolling the enterprise, are reportedly pulling back their support, expressing frustration that the security umbrella they relied upon from the United States has been damaged. The whole arrangement reeks of the kind of corruption that has defined Trump's business career, using the power of the presidency to funnel attention and revenue toward properties that bear his name, and doing it even as the underlying financial arrangements are crumbling. The PGA tournament at Doral is being greeted with the kind of cynical eye-roll that these arrangements always inspire, a visible reminder that the grift never stops, that the mixing of public office and private profit continues unabated, and that everyone involved seems to have accepted this as just the way things work now. I want to return to the central thesis here because it is important not to lose sight of what matters most amid the cascade of bizarre anecdotes and embarrassing moments. The President of the United States is not well. The evidence is not hiding. It is not subtle. It is visible every time he appears in public, every time he opens his mouth, every time his fingers hit the keyboard in the silent hours of the night. He is displaying classic symptoms of cognitive decline, disinhibition, confusion, grandiosity, loss of social judgment, inability to maintain coherent trains of thought, all of it happening with increasing frequency and intensity. The people who interact with him can see it. The astronauts standing awkwardly in the Oval Office could see it. The foreign leaders who have to navigate his unpredictability can see it. The whole world can see it, including the nations that wish America harm. And yet, the machinery of government continues to function around him as though everything is normal, as though the person occupying the highest office in the land is fully capable of executing the duties of the presidency. The medical reports that emerge from his team paint a picture of robust health that contradicts everything visible to the naked eye. The inner circle enables and protects, laughing at jokes that are not funny, nodding along with assertions that are not true, pretending that the emperor is fully clothed, while everyone outside the palace can plainly see otherwise. Judge for yourself. That is all I am asking. Watch the footage of the Oval Office meeting with the astronauts and tell me that what you are seeing is a man in full command of his faculties. Read the late-night posts and tell me they represent the reflections of a stable and healthy mind. Listen to the confusion between Ukraine and Iran and tell me this is someone who can be trusted to make split-second decisions about nuclear weapons and military deployments. The evidence is right there, available for anyone who is willing to look at it honestly, and the conclusion it points toward is increasingly difficult to avoid. Donald Trump's health is collapsing, physically and cognitively, and it is happening in plain sight while the White House guests stand frozen in horrified silence, trapped in a moment none of them signed up for, witnesses to something they will be processing for the rest of their lives.